Professor Marandi, welcome back to Think BRICS.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's our pleasure. So I would really start to talk about the Islamabad talks because it's something very important on the top of the news. Yesterday, the Iranian delegation withdrew from the nuclear talks scheduled in Islamabad. This is something that shocked a little the whole world. And in your opinion, what were the decisive factors behind this decision? Does this is a signal, a tactical pause, or is literally the end of the diplomatic track? What's your opinion?
Well, these aren't nuclear talks. The United States, of course, waged a very bloody war and murdered thousands of Iranians along with the Israeli regime and destroyed a lot of infrastructure, destroyed hospitals, schools, ambulances, and it destroyed apartment blocks. Excuse me. Destroyed apartment blocks, slaughtering lots of people inside. So these negotiations were after the ceasefire that we saw a couple of weeks ago in Islamabad, a ceasefire where the Americans accepted Iran's 10-point plan and as the basis of discussion. But during those talks, it was clear that the United States did not give Vance the authority to make decisions. He was constantly on the phone, and one of the people who he was contacting with, or one of the people who he was contacting was Netanyahu. And Netanyahu also said that Vance reported to him, which is a very strange thing to say for Vance to report to Netanyahu. But in any case, after that, we saw that the Israeli regime refused to abide by the ceasefire and slaughtered people and civilians and women and children in Lebanon for 10 days. Finally, when it did accept the ceasefire, the United States refused to remove its blockade on Iranian ports, which is another violation of the ceasefire. So since the United States is violating the ceasefire as we speak, the Iranians are saying that we have nothing to talk about. The United States cannot violate a ceasefire that is agreed upon and then have further talks. Those talks are meaningless because basically the United States is saying that we will agree to something, but we won't carry it out, but we expect you to carry out what you agreed to do. Those are not talks, and therefore they're not fruitful, and Iran will not accept them.
Thank you. So the central point, striking point, remains uranium enrichment, right? We heard about some different positions also on social medias in the latest couple of days, coming from the US, and some analysts also were discussing about it. So Iran calls to a sovereign right under the treaties to be able to decide by himself what to do with his uranium and with his nuclear project. On the other side, the US are demanding for a 20 years freeze of the program. So is there any realistic space for the compromise or not? Is in this case diplomacy working, or is just a game between the parts that nothing will figure out?
Iran is not going to give up its sovereign right on any issue. The revolution 47 years ago was about independence. It was about sovereignty. It was about dignity. And Iran is not going to give that up in order to appease an aggressive regime. The Trump regime is only carrying out this war because the Zionists want this of him. Netanyahu wants this of him. This is not me saying this. This is Joe Kent, the who was just recently the head of U.S. counterintelligence and a Trump appointee. When he resigned after the war began, He said that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, Iran is not a threat to the United States, and we are carrying out this war because the Zionist lobby in the United States wants it and because the Israeli regime wants it. So it is clear that the Zionist regime wants the United States to attempt to take away Iran's sovereignty from it. Under no circumstances is this going to happen. And the United States, by obeying the Zionist lobby, is working against its own interests. It has fought a war with Iran, and it has lost. And it is not going to gain something at the negotiating table, which it failed to get on the battlefield.
So, you've often highlighted in your previous interviews and articles about a profound discrepancy between the US-Israeli position and Iran's one. So for our audience, what does this asymmetry look like in practice? Is it about only trust or incompatible goals, something like you were just explaining, or it's fundamentally a different approach of civilization, of understanding of sovereignty?
I think it is a fundamental issue. There is a fundamental gap between Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Axis of Resistance, and the United States and the Israeli regime. In our worldview, ethnosupremacism in Palestine or anywhere else is unacceptable. In the worldview of the United States and, of course, the Israeli regime, Zionists, Ashkenazi Jews, Jews from across the world who have no roots in Palestine, they are the master race. They are the chosen people. And others are subhuman, lesser people. And that, of course, includes the Palestinians first and foremost. So the Palestinians for the Israeli Zionist population are Amalek. And Amalek can be wiped out. They can be exterminated. And of course, everyone else can be wiped out and exterminated based on that logic. So the fundamental problem for Iran is that ethnosupremacism basically is something that we cannot compromise with. The only acceptable outcome for the conflict is equality among all human beings, Christian, Muslim, Jew, in the land of Palestine. And of course, human equality is something that is unacceptable to Israelis, and it is unacceptable to their European and North American supporters.
You've focused on such a thing that I think it's very important. That point of what is civilization and which are the real civilizations rooted on Palestine, and I'm thinking about looking forward to which is the program of this kind of a new Gaza that they plan to do with the help of United States, literally trying to transform Gaza and whole Palestine in such a kind of province of the US, basing their same models of culture. I don't want to call it civilization because they are not a civilization. That's a point, very important. And how they are trying now also to lie to the whole world in this war, and how they are manipulating public opinion and information. That's something very, very curious and very important, I think, to focus. So thank you very much, because looking forward, we really see how this class of civilization, it's really a battle for humanity. Barbarians by one side and humanity on the other side. So let me just come back, Professor Marandi, to the Pakistani talks, because we are looking forward to some solutions. Of course, everybody, I think, hope for a peaceful solution, even if we are already in a war, the third war of the Gulf. We are already, by my opinion, in a new order of the Middle East. So we really have to try to focus to look to the future. So Pakistani talks and Pakistan in general has facilitated the talks, proposing this so-called Islamabad process as a kind of ongoing framework. Okay, so beyond this mediation, what concrete stabilizing effect could this regional diplomacy produce? I'm talking especially about the relation between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, for example, but also if in this sense they will let, and I'm talking when I say they, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, the other monarchies, they will let Iran to be the real center of the Middle East, the real mediator, the real superpower emerging, which is leading now. And it showed to the world that they can face nuclear powers like the United States, like Israel, by themselves. And so they could really maybe become the leaders of the region, guaranteeing a regional stability. What's your opinion about this? Through diplomacy, which could be the good outputs of this ongoing framework, if there are or not?
Iran doesn't see any country in the region as being a threat. After all, Iran has just defeated the United States and its coalition, meaning the Israeli regime, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, the Emirates, the UAE, Jordan, all of them together collaborated to wage a war against Iran, and they failed. They lost the war. At the beginning of the war, Trump demanded unconditional surrender, and by day 40, he agreed to negotiate taking the 10-point Iranian plan as the framework. So that clearly indicates the United States failed. And this, of course, is the third war that the United States has imposed on the Iranian people. In 1980, the United States supported Saddam Hussein in invading Iran. The United States led the effort to fund Saddam through these Arab regimes and to give him weapons, including chemical weapons that were given through Germany. Then last year, the United States and the Israeli regime carried out a war against Iran, a 12-day war, which they failed. And then this much bigger war was carried out, and they failed here as well. So it's obvious that for Iran, a regime like Saudi Arabia or the Israeli regime, they are no threat to the country. The threat to the country was the United States, and even though it was with a host of other allies and proxies, it failed too. So what Iran wants for the region is not hegemony or domination. It wants a region free of ethnosupremacism. And it believes that ethnosupremacism, as long as it lasts, will prevent peace and prevent stability across the region.
Well, so you partially already answered and said to everybody, which is the trustworthiness of Pakistan in this process, because we know that he tried to maintain such a kind of neutrality, if we can call so, but on the other side is still with open channels to all the other players. Also, Israel commented about these talks of Pakistan, and they said that they questioned publicly about the neutrality of Pakistan. Do you think, just a very brief answer, Pakistan could remain in this playing or not, or it will be kicked off very soon? Because if they quit with Pakistan, maybe they will move directly to war, or they can maybe try to reshape this relation with Pakistan to figure out a different solution. As we know, you mentioned it, they don't accept the conditions asked by Iran, and Iran is on a top position in this relation, is winning the war, and they shouldn't question about the points of the request by Iran. But that's what is going on, and we also know on the other side that United States still didn't show. It's so sorry to say that, but we know it's true. Still didn't show its power as a warrior, not at all, and they are ready to attack. So, do you think that Pakistan will be able again to mediate for Iran, or it's just at the end of its role?
Well, the 10 Iranian demands are very reasonable demands. And in order to have an agreement, ultimately a final agreement with the United States, they have to be met. That is not going to change. And if the United States wishes to attack again, they will lose again. And it will be much more bloody this time round, and it will be much more destructive. And after such a war, I suppose that there will no longer be oil and gas or petrochemicals or fertilizers coming from the Persian Gulf for a number of years. And therefore, we will have a global economic depression, not a recession, but a depression that will last for years, and it will create suffering across the globe. But if that is what the United States wants, then that is what will happen. The United States overestimated its strength. It underestimated the resolve of the Iranian people, the culture of resistance among Iran and the axis of resistance, and thus it went to war. And now, instead of looking for an off-ramp, it may seek to escalate. That escalation for the United States will be catastrophic. It will be catastrophic for the world. But Iran is not going to bow down to the Americans because they threaten to slaughter women and children, because they threaten to obliterate Iranian women and children, because they threaten to send Iranian women and children back to the Stone Age, just because they threaten to wipe out our civilization does not mean that we will not stand. Standing and dying is preferable to living on our knees. And thus, the United States is not going to be able to gain concessions from Iran from this manner, in this way. But Pakistan is a country that is very friendly to Iran. When the Iranian delegation was in Islamabad, ordinary Pakistanis saw Iran and Iranians as heroic. And they treated the delegation as a delegation of heroes. Whether it was hotel staff, whether it was journalists, whether it was government officials, wherever we went, we were seen as heroes, not as individuals, but as representing a nation of heroes. So Iran is comfortable, very comfortable with being in Pakistan. But of course, the United States has to accept the reality on the ground that Iran is a sovereign and independent country with a very powerful sense of resistance, a very resilient people. And the only way that the United States can come to any agreement with Iran is for it to accept Iran's sovereignty.
We are going to close our interview, Professor, but I really want to ask you, looking ahead to the next 72 hours, to the next days, which will be very delicate, and we know that we can have an escalation, but also a de-escalation. What is the single most important signal, diplomatic, military, economic, that the viewers should watch for to gauge whether this escalation is still possible, just to really give an honest hope and to be focused on the next events?
The United States must learn to respect other people and other nations. And in fact, a few years ago, two former White House officials wrote a book on Iran called Going to Tehran. And these two officials, Flint and Hillary Mann-Leverett, they basically dealt with many of the myths that we see in Western media and among Western think tankers about Iran. And then they give a roadmap for the United States, saying that they have to come to learn to respect Iran and to come to terms with Iran. And that's why they call the book Going to Tehran. When they wrote the book, they were attacked by all the think tankers, literally the Democrats and the Republicans. Why? Because the Zionist mode of thinking was dominant, and their idea was rejected. If the United States had chosen their path, we would have relations with the United States today, and there would be no global crisis. But the United States chose the opposite and chose to prioritize the demands of Zionism. And this has caused the crisis that we're in today. So the only way forward is for the United States to listen to the likes of these two writers and learn to respect the country. Then we can have peace. But until then, Iran is prepared for war.
Thank you so much, Professor Marandi, for such these essential insights. And if you found this analysis valuable, please subscribe to Think BRICS, hit the like button and share this interview to help us to diffuse the independent multipolar perspectives. And join us next time as we continue to explore the stories that shape our world from the global south, from the global audience. Thank you very much. This is Lorenzo Maria Pacini and this is Think BRICS.